Fair use. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing.
Before we start the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I appreciate all the support I received from you. And as always, all the information in my videos is rumors taken from the internet or the street. I'm not saying the information is fact.
Pick your mans up.
And just because people used to come through shooting at us every day. And this block, words can't even explain, man. Can't even explain.
Yeah, man. Little School Valley, 05 way on money. Young money, man. They in the building.
600 boy, LA, man. LA Capone, man. Get it to him, man. OC2 boys, man. Team
Number 9, man. Number 9 shooter, you hear me?
Hey, bitch, this little bitch. Yeah. Fuck is wrong with you? Hey, I am Brick Squad. Brick Squad, boy. Fuck is you talking about, boy?
You have to be willing to die or go to jail for 100 years if that's the lane that you're stepping in. You have to understand that whether you 15, 16, you got to think like a man. You know what I'm saying?
So don't be in it. Oh, you're not? Why does everybody say you're only 16 years old?
They say what they want to say.
How old are you?
300.
The story of WickedTown. This is the story of one of Chicago's largest RICO cases, targeting one of the city's most dangerous gangs. I previously mentioned them in the story about Pluto from Ghost Mob. Known as WickedTown, they operate on the west side of Chicago. The RICO case involved significant seizures of drugs, weapons, and charges connected to over a dozen homicides against 13 members of WickedTown. WickedTown's rise to prominence is largely tied to its involvement in the narcotics trade, along with the escalating gun violence that has plagued Chicago for decades. The west side of Chicago has long been a battleground for gang disputes, and WickedTown became notorious for its role in various violent confrontations, particularly with rival gangs. WickedTown's members have been involved in numerous shootings and murders, often as part of ongoing conflicts with other gangs in nearby neighborhoods. Much of this violence is driven by disputes over drug turf, personal vendettas, and retaliation for previous attacks. WickedTown is a faction made up of members who identify with the traveling vice lords and are based in Chicago's Austin neighborhood, near Oak Park. Their main territories include the intersections of Ohio and Leamington and Huron and Leamington. The group was formed in the 1980s and is allied with Huron Mob, L-Town, and LMG, all of which are part of Same Gang. One notable member, Rust, was closely connected to both WickedTown and LMG Same Gang. Tragically, on June 4, 2014, Rust was shot and killed by 3 members of the rival gang MOF, which operates around Ferdinand and Lawler. Dennis and Reginald, 2 of the 3 involved, was later charged with the murder. WickedTown has a lot of enemies, including Ghost Mob, Sniper Gang, LF 5200, MVPAC, 2, FG, CNR, and previously mentioned, MOF. The name WickedTown likely comes from the gang's reputation for violence and criminal activity, particularly involving drug dealing and retaliatory shootings. 3 rules govern the WickedTown street gang: never lose or sell a WickedTown gun, never talk to law enforcement, and use violence. Like many Chicago street gangs, WickedTown's formation was a result of the fragmentation of larger gangs into smaller cliques or sets that dominate specific territories. These smaller factions often bear the names of their neighborhoods or blocks. WickedTown also goes under other names such as Telemob and Rust World. Another prominent member of WickedTown was Mokes. On August 8, 2010, Mokes shot and killed a 15-year-old named Troy Brown Jr. from the 4900 set. Troy was walking with a 13-year-old girl on the 4900 block of West Iowa Street when Mokes approached and opened fire. Troy was later pronounced dead, while the girl was injured but survived. A few weeks after the incident, 16-year-old Mokes was identified by an eyewitness in a photo lineup. In January 2011, Cook County Criminal Court Judge Mary Margaret Brosnahan issued a warrant for his arrest in connection with the murder, according to court records. Mokes was eventually arrested in Wisconsin. However, prosecutors interviewed the eyewitness and ultimately decided not to charge Mokes, believing the witness testimony wasn't strong enough. Mokes was released without any charges, with a Cook County State's Attorney's Office spokesperson confirming that the case was dropped due to insufficient evidence but declining to provide further details. 2 months later, Mokes was killed in what police suspect was a retaliatory shooting for his involvement in Troy's death. His body was discovered in an alley near the 5300 block of West Ferdinand Street, an area considered to be WickedTown territory. Mokes had been shot multiple times and was pronounced dead at 17. Troy's name later became part of the name TNG, standing for Troy and Gerald, while Mokes's name was memorialized as Mokes World. Before I move on in the story, I want to tell you a little about the history of the traveling vice lords since I find it very interesting myself. On the west side of Chicago in the late 1950s, a group of young African American men from the North Lawndale neighborhood came together, bound by their need for protection and brotherhood in an environment rife with danger. They were led by Edward Pepe Perry and other like-minded youth. In the midst of the poverty and violence that plagued their community, they sought to create something that would give them strength, solidarity, and a sense of identity. Thus, the Vice Lords were born. Initially, the Vice Lords were a social club more than anything else. They shared a common struggle against the harsh realities of urban life, finding solace in each other's company. But as the years went by, their influence and notoriety grew, and they became one of the most prominent street gangs in Chicago. What began as a small group looking for safety soon transformed into a much larger organization involved in various criminal activities. By the 1960s, the Vice Lords had expanded into different factions. Each faction had its own identity, yet all were united under the larger Vice Lord nation. Among these factions, one would rise to prominence: the Traveling Vice Lords. The Traveling Vice Lords were formed as a unique branch of the Vice Lord nation, representing members who were more mobile and organized. They weren't content with staying confined to one neighborhood or territory. Instead, they aimed to expand their reach beyond the west side of Chicago. The name Traveling reflected their intent to move and grow, to stretch their influence to different parts of the city, and eventually beyond. Their formation was driven by a combination of factors. As the Vice Lords grew, so did their ambitions. They needed a faction that could move beyond the traditional borders and spread the Vice Lord influence into new areas. The Traveling Vice Lords were those who took on that challenge. They were often seen as the more adventurous and strategic members of the Vice Lords, willing to cross into enemy territories, build alliances, and take risks. In the 1970s and 1980s, the Traveling Vice Lords became known for their involvement in organized crime, particularly drug trafficking. As the crack epidemic swept through urban America, the Traveling Vice Lords capitalized on the opportunity, establishing themselves as major players in the drug trade. This expansion brought them wealth and power, but it also brought violence, as they clashed with rival gangs over territory. Despite the criminal undertones, the Traveling Vice Lords, like other factions within the Vice Lord nation, were also rooted in the struggle of black urban communities. Many of their members had grown up in environments of systemic racism, poverty, and neglect. For some, the gang offered a way to survive when legitimate opportunities were scarce. Throughout their history, the Traveling Vice Lords, like other factions of the Vice Lords, have been a paradox. On one hand, they are a criminal organization involved in illegal activities. On the other, they are a product of the social conditions that shaped them. Their story, like that of many street gangs, is one of survival, power, and the complex legacy of urban America's marginalized communities. WickedTown have officially lost around 12 members in total, give or take. In 2010, they lost both Shano and Lil Phil. In March 2011, they lost previously mentioned Mokes. In May 2012, they lost Wheezy. In June 2014, they lost Rust, as I mentioned earlier. In 2016, which was a very tough year for WickedTown, they lost 5 members. In late January, they lost Telly, who was shot and killed while standing outside with a group of friends in the 4600 block of West Huron. Police reports state that Telly got into an argument with someone before shots started to go off. His mother, who claims her son was innocent and not a gang member. 9 months later, on October 9, 2016, Heavy from WickedTown was killed after getting shot in the face and back while traveling in a vehicle in the 1700 block of North Mayfield. Exactly 2 months after that, on December 9th, 16-year-old Peasy Glow from the hub/WickedTown died in a car crash after attempting to flee a traffic stop. Two weeks later, on December 23rd, 2 members, Bougie and Tip, who both claim WickedTown and Huron Mob, were murdered. They were killed after leaving a house in Huron Mob territory, allegedly by 2 members from their own gang, WickedTown. The 2 individuals identified by the FBI as the suspected shooters are DT, then 43, and Huncho, then 21, both members of WickedTown. This double homicide is part of the 19 murders included in the RICO case. Bougie was allegedly a drug dealer working for DT, but DT suspected him of stealing from the gang, leading to his execution. In a testimony, DT admitted to shooting Bougie's cousin, Tip, 20, in the head before chasing Bougie, 21, into a basement stairwell and fatally shooting him multiple times. In open court, prosecutors referred to DT as a serial murderer and sociopath. The comment came during an argument to bear evidence that in addition to killing multiple human beings, DT also abused and tortured dogs as part of a dog-fighting operation. DT pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy involving 6 murders, 2 attempted murders and drug trafficking on behalf of the WickedTown gang enterprise. DT stated he was blessed into WickedTown during his early teens. DT testified that he had been in and out of prison since 1996, with convictions for firearm possession, robbery, and drug trafficking. In 2005, he was sentenced to 12 years for shooting a rival gang member. After his release, DT noted the gang scene had changed. There was no more unity among the younger members of the traveling vice lords. Now a 5-star, an older gang member, he began taking matters into his own hands since he didn't have to follow anyone's orders anymore. It was now that all hell would really break loose. On August 16, 2016, DT shot a rival gang member in the wrist as part of an ongoing dispute over drug turf, he said. The next month, another drug dispute led to a confrontation with a 4CH nicknamed Ruthless. After driving into rival territory with Pops with the intent to discuss the issue, DT said he saw Ruthless approaching their car with what appeared to be a gun sticking out of his pocket. DT said his body language was threatening, prompting him to open fire. Surveillance video of the incident shows 3 muzzle flashes before Ruthless falls to the ground, shot twice in the chest. He survived. Just 2 days after that shooting, DT testified that he was contracted by another gang member, Donald Holmes Sr., the father of his good friend Moneybag from WickedTown, to travel to Kankakee and find a drug supplier who Holmes believed had robbed him of narcotics and cash during a home invasion several years earlier. DT picked up 2 associates and made the 60-mile drive to the home of the victim, Neil. DT said they knocked on the door, and after Neil's son let them in, they immediately pulled guns and accused Neil of robbing the gang. When Neil, 56, protested, one of DT's associates shot him in the head, DT testified. DT then went to Neil's son, Donjalou, 24, and shot him in the head as he was lying on the floor. When Neil's other son, Devontae, 21, heard the commotion and opened the door to his bedroom, DT shot him in the head too. DT testified that he killed the sons because they were witnesses. On the way out of the home, they grabbed money off a table and DT fired 1 more bullet into the father's lifeless body, he testified. DT said he did it so that each of his associates would know they were culpable in Neil's shooting and no one would tell on each other. After testifying about several attempted murders and the killing of an entire family, DT went on to admit to the double homicide of Bougie and Tip, which I previously mentioned. He then confessed to another murder, his last. DT told the jury that he had been working with an associate of the Black P Stones to distribute narcotics when a fight broke out between the associate and a man named Antoine Watkins. During the chase, DT fired a .45 caliber pistol, fatally wounding Antoine. This occurred in early February, but Antoine's body wasn't discovered until a month later, in March, when he was found face down in a vacant lot with multiple gunshot wounds. DT is a controversial figure to say the least, even to other gang members. He really is a sociopath, and later during the RICO investigation he chose to cooperate with police, which we will come to later in the story. After a challenging 2016 filled with several defeats, the next loss didn't occur until just over a year later, in late January 2018. This event is particularly intriguing because the murder was later included in the RICO case, as the defendants had killed one of their own. This event is central as it was the starting point for the FBI's investigation that would initiate the entire RICO case. In the fall of 2017, one of WickedTown's leaders, Deshaun Morgan, also known as Donk, then 37 years old, was pushing narcotics all over the west side of Chicago. Donk believed that one of his own, Donald Holmes Jr., also known as Moneybag, was working with law enforcement as a confidential informant. As a result, Donk arranged a murder-for-hire plot, enlisting two members from WickedTown, Scudder and Looney, to kill Moneybag in exchange for $5,000 and an assault rifle. On the night of January 31, 2018, the three defendants, Donk, Scudder and Looney allegedly lured Moneybag to the 4700 block of West Harthington Street, which was outside Scudder's house, according to police records. While Moneybag sat in his parked Jeep with his girlfriend Diane, Scudder got into the vehicle and shot both victims multiple times in the back of their heads. The couple was pronounced dead at the scene. The day after the murders, officials said Looney bought a used Buick LeSabre for $900 in cash and allegedly took a trip to Minneapolis where they believe he traded the handgun used in the murders for a different firearm. However, law enforcement eventually recovered the gun used in the murders after a Minnesota resident was arrested in Milwaukee in February 2018 with it in his possession. Officials later actually confirmed Donk's suspicion that Moneybag did in fact previously work as a cooperating source for law enforcement, however not at the time of the murders. However, the family of Moneybag have denied these rumors. Donk said Moneybag had previously told him he'd been working with law enforcement, but it didn't immediately bother him. It wasn't until later, after Donk was stopped by police after getting off the phone with Moneybag, that he said he began to have suspicions. The top leader, Donald Lee, also known as Lil Don, or Pops, is one of the 13 individuals indicted and has been active in the streets since the mid-90s when WickedTown was first formed. Prosecutors claim he quickly rose through the ranks after committing 2 murders in 2 years, and later becoming the leader by killing a rival gang chief, John Johnson, also known as Forehead, on June 15, 2003. Forehead was a leader of a faction of 4CH. Pops allegedly carried out his first murder on July 22, 2000, when he shot and killed a man named Lamont Ware. His second came on December 23, 2002, when he shot and killed Ernest Moore, also known as Pee-wee. Later, in 2015, Pops is alleged to have committed 3 murders within 3 months. The first occurred on May 23 when he, along with Flocka, another one of the 13 indicted, allegedly shot and killed Shadow from MOF. On July 15, Pops, together with Jubin, who is also among the indicted, killed Baz. Later, on August 23, he slid with Scudder and Looney and allegedly killed Mikey from TNG, which I mentioned in the story of Pluto 2X from Ghost Mob. 2 years later, on December 23, 2017, he was involved in his 7th murder, the killing of K-Money from LF5200/Guap Gang. Scudder, Looney, and Flocka were also part of the hit. In addition to being a rival gang member, K-Money had frequently dissed WickedTown on social media, making him a target. WickedTown's second-in-command, Deshaun Morgan, known as Don or Big Bro, shockingly turned on the gang's top leader, Pops, by cooperating with authorities. Deeply embedded in Chicago's West Side gang life from a young age, Don was dealing drugs by 12 and climbing the ranks of the mafia and insane vice lords. Last week, he testified before a federal jury, recounting how he navigated the intricate gang hierarchies in Austin and West Lawndale. He gained respect by adhering to the strict street code against snitching. Over the years, he survived shootings, fired back at rivals, faced murder charges in his 20s, and was eventually acquitted. Don even ordered the killing of a close friend, Moneybag, whom he suspected of cooperating with the police. Despite his deep involvement, Don claimed he never aspired to be the kingpin at the top, with all the pressure and heat that role brings. A self-described master manipulator, he preferred operating from the shadows, making moves to benefit himself rather than out of loyalty to the gang. Having pleaded guilty to racketeering, Don became a key witness for the prosecution, linking several violent acts to WickedTown, including the 2018 execution-style murders of Moneybag and Diane on West Harthington Street, a hit he orchestrated. He testified against Scudder and Looney, the men he hired for the killings. Meanwhile, defense attorneys for Pops and Blackie portrayed Don as a self-serving liar and sociopath willing to do or say anything to save himself, even if it meant betraying or harming others. Don testified that his suspicions about Moneybag being a police informant intensified after a traffic stop in November 2017. His doubts grew further when, shortly after introducing Moneybag to Will Pinero, a high-ranking member of WickedTown, Pinero's house was raided by police. "I'd sent him to get some drugs from Will, and right after that, his house got raided," Don said in court. However, prosecutors argued that Don's instincts were off. While Moneybag had previously cooperated with law enforcement, at the time of the murders, he was actually under a court-authorized wiretap as part of a different federal investigation. Don also revealed to the jury that he never officially joined WickedTown, though he had long-standing friendships and business dealings with Pops and other senior members. He described how some of the younger gang members, including Blackie, developed a reputation for recklessly shooting people during armed robberies. They basically started shooting everybody they robbed. There really wasn't any reason for it, Don recalled. In his testimony, Don also implicated Pops in the December 2002 killing of Pee Wee, which prosecutors claimed was a pivotal moment in Pop's rise to power in WickedTown. Don further recounted a conversation with Pops about the murder of Forehead, the leader of a rival gang faction, whom prosecutors alleged Pops killed in June 2003 to consolidate his control over the gang. In 2020, before the RICO case was unsealed, Pops was arrested for a gun crime and was interviewed by police where he defended WickedTown. This was before he knew of the scope of the federal investigation. The interview was recorded and was later used as evidence against him in the RICO trial. In that recording, Pops repeatedly defended WickedTown and the street code by which he and associates lived, saying it was their only means of survival. Dressed in a blue t-shirt, red and purple pajama bottoms and flip-flops, Pops spoke in a casual tone as he tried to tell the agents that he and his associates were careful only to go after rivals and snitches, who were playing the same dangerous game and deserve what they get. Like, that's why I'm talking to you. I wanted to change your perception of WickedTown, said Pops, who was handcuffed to the cinder block wall of a windowless interrogation room. WickedTown, yes, it's a street gang. But at the same time, we don't go killing people just to kill them. We are out there hurting the right kind of people. No kids, no old lady. You see what I'm saying? Pops also riffed on the massive increase in firepower available on the streets, including large-capacity magazines and switches that turn ordinary pistols into machine guns capable of firing bursts of up to 40 bullets with a single squeeze of the trigger. I remember my first gun was a .38 with a nail in it, Pops said at one point on the recording. "I had to put a nail in the barrel to keep it standing. Now these youngins got 40 clips with switches and shit. They think it's a video game. We live in a video game. This is Grand Theft Auto. We are two different worlds, man," Pops said. "You in the real world. Like, if you F up at your job, you get reprimanded. You F up in the streets, you die." In the first week of the scheduled 2-month trial, jurors were introduced to the deep-rooted history of gangs on Chicago's West Side. The testimony began with Markel Russell, also known as Will Pinero, a founding member of WickedTown. Will explained that joining gangs was a rite of passage for him, especially after his father, a traveling vice lord, was murdered in 1978. Having pleaded guilty to racketeering, Will is hoping prosecutors will recommend a sentence of 10 to 20 years in exchange for his cooperation and truthful testimony. Will recounted how he was blessed into the vice lords as a teenager, learning the gang's faith-based principles and rituals, which he said emphasized how to conduct oneself as a man. When his older brother was imprisoned for attempted murder in 1994, Will assumed leadership of WickedTown, constantly at odds with rival factions of the Four Corner Hustlers and other nearby gangs. In 1996, Will was shot in the abdomen, resulting in partial paralysis. The nerve damage from the injury still affects him today, leaving him with a pronounced limp, which led him to temporarily step back from leading the gang. Will also recalled an early encounter with Pops, who was just a little kid at the time. During a street fight, Pops was nearly choked unconscious but fought back by smashing glass bottles on his opponent. "I liked him," Will testified. "He was a scrappy little kid. He wasn't backing down from anything." By the late 1990s, Pops had earned a reputation as one of the gang's enforcers, or shooters. After killing 3 people in 3 years, Pops quickly rose through the ranks and eventually became the leader of WickedTown. Another member who received a lot of attention was Torrance Benson, also known as Blackie, who had been involved in 2 murders of the 19. One of his victims was 24-year-old Martell Howard, also known as Telly, who was a member of the same gang as Blackie, WickedTown. It is unknown why Blackie murdered him and tried to murder his friend who was with him that night. Telly's mother came forward at the trial and stated that a friend who had been with her son that night came to her and said that Blackie was the shooter. Telly Mob was later created in his honor, and as you probably can guess, this murder sparked internal conflicts within WickedTown. Blackie was also noticed for several videos he had posted on social media where he taunted rivals. In one video he said, "I'm tired of killing people, I'm taking a break, I'm a Christian." In another video he said, "This is a lovely day on Ferdinand. Where's everybody at?" Blackie said, glancing from side to side. As headlights appeared on the quiet street, Blackie yelled a warning to his associates, "On that car you all," before the video goes dark. As you have noticed, there has been a lot of backdooring going on in WickedTown, with Telly, Moneybag, Bougie and Tip all murdered by their own. This did not help to keep the loyalty between the defendants during the investigation and trials. Many had underlying grudges against each other, and one of them was DT, who we talked about earlier. Attorneys for Pops and Blackie have argued the prosecution's case is built largely on the testimony of other WickedTown members who are cooperating with authorities in order to get a break in their own cases. Some of them are killers and admitted liars, while others have been paid by the government both in money and in promises of reduced sentences, according to the defense. DT had told a federal jury that after learning in 2018 that members of his own gang had executed his longtime friend over suspicions he was a snitch, he decided to do the unthinkable, wire up for federal agents and help them solve the crime. The friend he refers to as Moneybag, who, together with his girlfriend, were murdered by Scudder from WickedTown after being suspected to be an informant for the police, which police actually confirmed later. DT stated that Moneybag was like a little brother for him. Besides DT, There were allegedly other snitches as well who decided to cooperate with police to save their own skin. Pops was later captured and intercepted jail calls talking with WickedTown members about his suspicions that DT had flipped. "Not you. Not you, Dante," he lamented in one call played in court, saying that even the toughest seemed to be turning against them. Another prominent figure in the trial was Darius Murphy, also known as Scudder or Scudda. Scudder is implicated in 7 murders on the list, identified as one of the killers. Prosecutors informed the judge that Scudder was notorious as the most ruthless gunman in WickedTown and suggested that he could be the most violent, dangerous, and depraved defendant to ever stand before the court. When the moment arrived for U.S. District Judge Thomas Durkee to sentence Scudder, who had confessed to murdering 7 people in under 3 years, the judge reflected on the federal authorities' earlier warnings. He then looked directly at Scudder and said, "I don't know if you have a soul." In the trial, a tape was also played where Scudder brags about having killed Moneybag from WickedTown and his girlfriend, which I previously told you about. In the tape you hear Scudder say, "I got in the back seat, shot him in the back of his head. Pow pow." Then, he allegedly added, "His girl tried to bail out. I grabbed her by the back of her wig. I said, 'Where are you going?' Pow pow. Then I hit him in his head 2 more times. Pow pow." The judge pointed out that in some states, Scudder could have faced lethal injection, the electric chair, hanging, or even a firing squad. Ultimately, however, Judge Durkee accepted a plea agreement negotiated between Scudder and the prosecutors, which limited his sentence to 50 years in prison. Durkee sentenced the 23-year-old to that half-century behind bars, acknowledging that the deal provided closure for the victims' families, who would be spared the uncertainties of a trial and the potential for a lengthy appeals process. Still, Durkee said the sentence mocks the values of the victims. "What a waste," he told the courtroom at the end of the hearing. "What a waste of lives." Several relatives of the victims spoke at the trial, expressing that Scudder should never walk free again or even remain on this earth. Sandra recounted the day Scudder murdered her son, Dan Rance, also known as Dan from TNG. Scudder shot Dan in the back, then stood over him and continued the execution. In court, Sandra described Scudder as a vile, ruthless, treacherous person, and a serial murderer. Scudder also killed Alfred Stovall, known as Red, in April 2017, shooting him 7 times at close range because he believed Red was part of a rival gang, according to federal authorities. At the time, Red was removing his 1-year-old son from a car seat. Alfred's widow told the judge that her young children now refer to Scudder as the bad man. Scudder's other murder victims included James Douthart, killed in August 2015, Kishon Mobley, killed in December 2017, and Uriah Hughes, killed in January 2018. Even Scudder's defense attorneys, Molly and Cynthia, seemed to fight through tears during the hearing. Molly told the victims' relatives, "There are no words to make you whole." But she said Scudder was exceptionally vulnerable when he was taken in by WickedTown and weaponized by predators at age 14. Scudder also spoke during the hearing. He said he'd always looked for a father figure in his life. He and his attorneys said he is plagued by nightmares. And he repeatedly apologized to his victims' relatives, telling them he was doing it so I can try to go to sleep tonight. The judge began to hand down his sentence after Scudder spoke. He decried the carnage and the horror of Scudder's case. He asked, "What is the world you came from?" But he also said that adults failed Scudder, and he agreed that the leader of WickedTown, Pops, turned Scudder into a killing machine. The judge said that Scudder's father was missing in action, but he added that there are kids growing up without fathers, because you killed those fathers. As for Scudder's nightmares, the judge gestured to the side of the courtroom where the victim's relatives sat, and he told Scudder, "Everybody on that side of the room is plagued by nightmares too." The federal indictment, unsealed on November 1, 2021, charged 13 alleged leaders, members, and associates of the WickedTown faction of the traveling Vice Lords street gang with participating in a criminal organization responsible for murdering rivals and violently protecting a drug-dealing operation on Chicago's west side. The case encompasses not only 19 murders but also 19 attempted murders, multiple armed robberies, and assaults. Additionally, during the multi-year investigation, law enforcement seized 46 firearms, around 1,000 rounds of ammunition, approximately 17 kilograms of cocaine, roughly 7 kilograms of heroin, and about 100 grams of crack cocaine. The indictment further alleges that WickedTown members regularly promoted their violent activities on social media, posting comments, photos, and videos to claim gang affiliation, taunt rivals, and boast about murders and other acts of violence. The gang primarily operated in Chicago's Austin neighborhood, where members allegedly maintained trap houses to store firearms and illegal drugs, including cocaine and heroin. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jimmy Arce acknowledged that many of them are killers. But Pop's defense attorney, Lisa Wood, went further. Wood called them serial killers. She said one killed at least 5 people and once took a victim's dog as a souvenir. "He is a psychopath," she said. "Personally, this is the craziest gang I've done research on when it comes to pure violence and evil. I actually got sick to my stomach several times when I read about the horrifying crimes members of WickedTown had committed. Especially the murder of Moneybag and his girlfriend Diane Taylor. WickedTown is without doubt the most dangerous gang I have documented." Scudder was the first defendant in the WickedTown case to be sentenced. He was sentenced to 50 years in federal prison. David Arrington, also known as Day Day, murdered 2 people, shot and wounded 2 others, and served as the driver when fellow gang members murdered a man and attempted to murder another. He was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to a federal racketeering conspiracy charge. Marks Russell, also known as Will Pinero, was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Deshaun George, also known as D-Mac, was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Nashin Johnson, also known as Booty, was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Dante Dockett, also known as DT, was sentenced to 21 years in federal prison. Demont Brown, also known as Looney, was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. Victor Turner, also known as Jew Bean, was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. Willie Gardley, also known as Flocka, was sentenced to 26 years in federal prison. Deshaun Morgan, also known as Dog, was on August 15 this year sentenced to 32 years in federal prison. Pops, Blackie and Huncho have not received their sentences yet. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe, like and comment what you thought. Comment what you want to see next. God bless you all.